to just roll over and accept whatever they demanded. Now, if because Mozilla are standing up to them, what does that mean? Does that mean that Mozilla.org was suddenly seized for daring to question the legal authority?
I'm not sure that this administration could handle the political backlash from that, because Mozilla is not the backdoor fire name. I mean, non-technical people who don't know anything about their computer use Firefox right now. If suddenly Mozilla got seized by the government, with this little, U.S. government has taken this, there'd be backlash. The peasants can still revolt here. I don't think they'd be stupid enough to try that. But down the road, that makes sense. Honestly, what this has really brought up is something that people have brought up before, and that's the fact that the internet is dependent on a central name redirect thing, which is basically, if that goes down and you don't know the direct IP address of whatever site you're trying to reach, basically the internet doesn't work. One of the things people have been basically suggesting for a long time is that all the individual servers should participate in a P2P echoing where they forward to all the browsers via P2P decentralized a backup, so that even if the thing that Homeland Security immigration is seizing and basically redirecting and saying, well, this will no longer direct to that IP, because they're not seizing the actual server.
From a security point of view, it's too dangerous, because then the DNS poisoning is going to be more commonplace. One point that I was going to make, though, is in the case of Mozilla, they could retaliate against them in the sense that they could give them a very bad name. One of the things that the so-called intellectual property agencies like to do is to label countries as like being part of the rogue countries or the bad countries or something, if they don't agree to the rules and regulations of the WTO and WIPO. One of the other things that I was going to mention is, do you remember the situation with WikiLeaks? They managed to make it look like the whole DNS situation was something to do with heavy loads or the register, just about everything, including Amazon, pulling out of the hosting after some pressure from what's his name? Joe. What's his name?
Lieberman.
Yeah.
And this also reminds me of the news today, or something I found today. Did you read about Facebook closing down all kinds of groups of people who were just protesting lowering the fees and very, nothing even political, just things to do.
Yeah, I saw something about that. It was like anti-royal wedding groups and the cuts. Cuts.
I heard they also shut down pro-Palestinian groups sometimes, and this relates to one of the motivations for creating Freedom Box, replacing sites like Facebook as being the center of people organizing and expressing an opinion. Lots of people start to see all this censorship even in the West, everywhere in the West, and it's not just political in nature, it's just about anything that the site
as of late, it's basically become, I don't think I like that. And it's amazing how...
It's good for business, they'll say.
What's scary about that really as a whole is A, how easy it is to do, and B, that there isn't more of a huff and puff about it. I mean, like you're pointing out, whole groups were taken out. Where's the outcry from the public? Where's everybody, going, wait a minute.
Maybe they should create a group on Facebook to protest and see that disappear as well.
I think there's different things at work here. There's any organisation who want to get contracts with the mainstream, want to be part of the mainstream. Likes of Canonical, and back to Ubuntu and Canonical, they have designs on competing against Red Hat, competing against Novell, competing against Microsoft for government contracts, for contracts with schools and with hospitals and police departments and all that. So they want to be official. And to be official, they've got to play by certain rules. And unfortunately, these rules mean that they've got to sort of clamp down on things that don't go against the status quo. And that's what they choose to do because that's where the money is. When you look at Facebook, I heard with the Facebook groups, they had announced that they didn't actually respond to any pressure, which someone pointed out, well, that means they did it all by themselves. They weren't even asked to close down these groups. They just decided to close them down anyway, to try and appeal more, presumably, to the mainstream. I mean, Mozilla aren't trying to sell anything to anyone. They're a non-profit group. So there's nothing, they've nothing to lose by standing up to the DHS and saying, look, no, give us legal proof that what you're asking to do is legal. But Canonical, on the other hand, or any other major company, they've got the pressure of, well, if you don't comply, if you don't help us maintain the status quo, then you've got no chance of ever being even invited to a meeting where we're contracting out IT stuff. And the contracts will go to other companies, you know?
Well, and for anybody who thinks he's being paranoid, I can vouch for historical context that the United States is that petty. Way back when we came up with the idea of the minimum wage, Henry Ford was asked to sign on with it. He was paying every one of his workers more than minimum wage. And because he wouldn't sign on with the minimum wage plan, the United States government stopped doing business with Ford. And what was so stupid about that was Ford was paying his employees more than what the minimum wage was set at. His products were cheaper than the competition, yet the United States government, at great cost to the taxpayer, refused to buy anything Ford for over 20 years. It's just stupid.
Well, Gordon or Roy or even Rusty, is there any other topics that we want to cover? I know there's a few things that we briefly discussed before the beginning of the show. I don't know if now's a good time to move on to Sony, or Rusty, I don't know if you want to start with a Sony topic.
Why don't y'all start with Sony, because I don't know how that's being perceived on your over there in Europe.
This news, the way I read it today, BBC, so I'm not sure how accurate this is. Also, this for a bit of context. The BBC was trying to, well, I'm not sure they were trying, but it was very obvious they did, in fact, associate Anonymous with WikiLeaks at the time, and vice versa. So, and I gave lots of proof back in around December and January. They always would try to associate it to companies, to corporations or to organizations together. So one thing that actually happened was Anonymous was accused by Sony as being behind the attacks, being behind the credit card theft, or essentially theft is copying of the numbers. And Anonymous knows it's really quite an unpopular thing to do, because what they do here is they hurt lots of customers. People have to cancel credit cards and get new ones. So I don't really know if they're behind it and who's really Anonymous. It's really not obvious. And what actually is happening now is the handling by Sony of the situation of the whole fiasco, trying to not do the right thing about it, is going to apparently invoke a third action by Anonymous against, apparently now service attack by Anonymous against Sony. So that's the latest situation.
The article that I was reading, this, I think it was last week now, it seemed like it's something of a joke, because according to what I was reading, it appears that the reason why Sony is directing its big guns towards Anonymous was because of a file found on one of the exploited servers, which happened to have the name Anonymous, and that's led them to believe that it was the Anonymous group that were responsible for it. I think we've discussed it before, though, and I said this at the time. With Anonymous claiming to have no ranking structure and no central command, or for want of a better word, it's rather damaging to any message that they want to put out, because if you have nobody taking responsibility for the group of Anonymous, then there's nothing to stop any group starting a campaign under the banner of Anonymous, and that may be something conflicting with the popular view of the mainstream audience. Sony, for me, To be fair, and I have to say this, I wouldn't probably have noticed the PlayStation Network being down for the last 2 weeks. I've had a plethora of other things to do, and it's only because obviously the mainstream press that it's been receiving. But it seems after 2 weeks, maybe even more now, and